Have you ever stopped in the middle of your day and thought, what if I could be more? What if the life I'm living right now is only a small fraction of what I'm truly capable of? That question has haunted countless people. Some ignore it, while others chase it down until it changes their lives forever. The truth is, the answer often comes back to one powerful idea: you must invest in yourself. But before you imagine dollar signs or a financial portfolio, pause for a moment. Because what we're really talking about here is something deeper, something that money can't buy directly. It's about putting time, energy, and love into the one thing that will shape everything else in your world: your own growth. There's a story that begins in a small town, in a house with squeaky floors and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee. The main character, let's call him Daniel, grew up in a place where people believed success was a matter of luck or connections. He watched his neighbors work long hours, scraping by, telling themselves life was hard and that it would never really change. Daniel used to believe the same thing. He thought that if he could just get a job that paid enough to cover his bills, that would be enough. But deep down, a part of him was restless. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was really all life had to offer. One rainy evening, Daniel met a man at the library. The man was older, with gray hair and the kind of eyes that seemed to know things you couldn't quite put into words. They struck up a conversation. Daniel shared his frustration, and the older man smiled knowingly. "You know," the man said, "the best investment you can ever make isn't in stocks, it isn't in property, it isn't even in gold. It's in you. Your mind, your skills, your health, your character, these are the treasures that no one can take away." That sentence hit Daniel like a bolt of lightning. At first, he thought it sounded too simple. But the man explained how he had spent decades reading, learning, exercising, traveling, and surrounding himself with people who inspired him. "I don't regret a single dollar or hour I ever spent on becoming better," he said. "Because everything I have now, every opportunity, every bit of freedom, came from that decision." Daniel couldn't shake those words. They replayed in his mind the whole night. Invest in yourself. What did that mean for someone like him? He wasn't rich. He didn't have connections. He barely had enough confidence to believe he could do something extraordinary. But maybe, just maybe, he could start with something small. He began with books. Each morning, instead of turning on the television, he opened a book that challenged him. At first, it felt strange, like lifting weights he wasn't used to. But over time, his thoughts grew sharper, his imagination stretched wider. He started asking better questions about his life, his choices, and his future. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel noticed subtle changes. He carried himself differently. He spoke with more confidence. He even started meeting people who shared his hunger for growth. It was almost as if the universe was rewarding his effort by opening doors that had always been locked before. That's when he realized something powerful: investing in yourself doesn't just change you. It changes the world around you. Because when you begin to see more in yourself, others begin to see it too. One day, Daniel was invited to speak at a small community event. He was terrified. Public speaking was his greatest fear. But something inside him whispered, "This is the next step." So he stood in front of that room, his voice shaking, his palms sweating, but he told his story, the story of the restless nights, the meeting in the library, and the decision to grow. When he finished, the applause surprised him. But what surprised him even more were the people who came up afterward, saying his words had inspired them to start changing their own lives. That night, Daniel walked home under the glow of the streetlights, his heart pounding with a new kind of excitement. For the first time, he felt what it meant to live with purpose. He realized that investing in yourself isn't selfish. It's generous. Because when you grow, you have more to give. More courage to share, more strength to lend, more wisdom to offer. But here's the part most people miss: investing in yourself isn't always comfortable. In fact, it often feels like swimming against the current. Daniel learned that quickly. His old friends teased him for spending money on classes instead of nights out. They told him he was wasting his time reading books that wouldn't pay the bills. At first, their words stung. But then he remembered the older man's eyes, filled with quiet certainty, and he pressed on. One evening, he sat in his room surrounded by scattered notes and worn-out books, and he asked himself a question that would change everything. What kind of life do I want to live 10 years from now? The answer that rose in his heart was clear. He didn't want a life of survival. He wanted a life of meaning, of freedom, of contribution. And the only way to get there was to keep building, keep learning, keep becoming more than he had been yesterday. The turning point came when he discovered that self-investment isn't just about knowledge, it's about action. It's one thing to read, to dream, to plan. But it's another to put yourself in uncomfortable situations that stretch your limits. Daniel decided to take a risk. He applied for a position he didn't feel qualified for, something far beyond his comfort zone. To his shock, he got the job. And suddenly, he was surrounded by people who pushed him, challenged him, and expected more from him than he had ever expected from himself. In those early days, he made mistakes. He stumbled. He questioned whether he was truly cut out for this path. But every challenge became a lesson, every failure a stepping stone. Slowly, the boy from the small town, who once thought success was only for the lucky, began to see himself as capable, resourceful, and resilient. And here's where the story takes a turn, because what Daniel discovered next would test his belief in self-investment more than anything else. It wasn't about books. It wasn't about jobs. It wasn't even about money. It was about something deeper, something that most people neglect until it's too late. Daniel thought he had figured it out. He was reading, learning, working harder than ever, and surrounding himself with new challenges. Life was finally moving in the right direction. But sometimes, growth is tested in ways you never expect. One winter morning, as frost glazed the windows of his apartment, Daniel woke up feeling heavier than usual. His body was sluggish, his mind cloudy. At first, he blamed it on the cold weather. But the days turned into weeks, and the exhaustion didn't go away. He brushed it off, telling himself he had no time to slow down. But ignoring his health soon caught up with him. During an important meeting at work, he felt lightheaded and nearly fainted. That moment became a wake-up call he couldn't ignore. He realized something critical. What good is knowledge? Ambition or opportunity if the body carrying it all is weak and neglected? He remembered the words of the man in the library. Your health is the foundation of everything. Suddenly, it all made sense. Investing in yourself wasn't just about sharpening the mind. It was about strengthening the vessel that carries it, so Daniel made a new commitment. He joined a local gym, not to chase muscles or impress anyone, but to honor the energy his body needed for the life he wanted to live. At first, he felt out of place. The weights clanged, the treadmills buzzed, and everyone seemed to know what they were doing while he stumbled awkwardly. But instead of quitting, he treated it like learning a new language, slow, steady, one step at a time. With each workout, he noticed small changes. His energy returned. His posture straightened. He slept better, thought clearer, and felt alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. Food became fuel, not just habit. He began choosing meals that nourished rather than drained him. And with every choice, he reminded himself, this is an investment, not an expense. Something fascinating happened as his health improved, his confidence deepened. He found himself speaking more boldly, taking on projects with more energy, and approaching life with a sharper sense of purpose. But another challenge was waiting, one that would test his heart rather than his body. One evening, a close friend from his old neighborhood called. The friend laughed about Daniel's new lifestyle, saying he had become too serious, too different. "You're not the same guy anymore," the friend said, almost accusingly. The words stung, because in some ways they were true. Daniel wasn't the same. He was changing. He was growing. And growth often means leaving behind parts of yourself that no longer fit. That night, Daniel wrestled with a painful question: could investing in yourself mean losing people you care about? He thought back to all the nights he and his old friends shared. The easy laughter, the comfort of belonging. But he also knew those same nights often ended in regret, wasted hours, and empty mornings. Deep down, he realized that holding on to the past too tightly could keep him from the future he was building. It wasn't easy, but Daniel chose to keep moving forward. He didn't cut people off with anger. Instead, he quietly shifted his time toward those who inspired him, who believed in growth, who challenged him to rise higher. Over time, he noticed something interesting: the more he invested in himself, the more he attracted people who were on the same path. The energy you put out, he learned, has a way of circling back to you. Then came the greatest test of all. One summer, Daniel lost his job. The company downsized, and despite his effort and growth, he was let go. At first, the news felt crushing. Fear flooded his mind. What if he couldn't find another job? What if everything he had worked for collapsed overnight? But in the middle of that storm, he remembered a simple truth: when you invest in yourself, no one can take it away. Jobs can disappear, money can vanish, but the skills, the knowledge, the habits, the resilience, that stays. Instead of panicking, Daniel leaned on everything he had built. He polished his resume, practiced interviews, and reached out to his growing network. Within weeks, he found new opportunities, some even better than before. That experience taught him something profound. Investing in yourself is like building an invisible safety net. Life will throw challenges at you, unexpected losses, health scares, broken relationships, but the stronger you are inside, the more prepared you are to face them. Years later, Daniel stood on a stage much larger than the little community room where he first spoke. This time, hundreds of people were in the audience, waiting to hear his story. His voice was steady, his presence commanding. He spoke about the nights of doubt, the mornings of discipline, the hard choices, and the surprising rewards. He told them about the library meeting, the gym sessions, the setbacks, and the quiet victories no one else had seen. And as he spoke, he realized something beautiful. Investing in yourself doesn't just transform your own life, it ripples outward, touching everyone around you. The people in that audience weren't just listening. They were seeing themselves in his story. They were realizing that they too had the power to change, to grow, to choose something better. When the applause thundered through the room, Daniel smiled. Not because he felt important, but because he finally understood the gift of self-investment. It was never about becoming perfect or reaching some final destination. It was about the journey, the courage to keep moving, the faith to keep building, and the joy of sharing what you learn along the way. Later that night, as he walked back to his hotel under the glow of city lights, Daniel thought about how far he had come from that restless boy staring at the ceiling. He knew the journey wasn't over. It never really is. Because investing in yourself isn't a one-time decision. It's a lifelong practice, a promise you make to yourself every single day, and maybe that's the secret the old man in the library had always known. The greatest wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or possessions. It's measured in the strength of your mind, the resilience of your body, the depth of your character, and the kindness you offer to others. Those are treasures that grow with time, treasures no one can steal, so if you've been waiting for permission to begin, consider this your sign. Start where you are, with what you have, no matter how small. Read that book. Take that class. Go for that walk. Speak up in that room. Every step is a seed planted, and one day, you'll look back in amazement at the garden you've grown. Because just like Daniel discovered, the moment you choose to invest in yourself, the rest of your life begins to change. Share stories like this every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.